Two things. Nobody puts Baby in a corner, and Jennifer Grey ruined her career, ruined her face, took away everything.
During the late 1980s, Dirty Dancing lit up the screen with electric chemistry, unforgettable music, and heart-pounding dance scenes. It became a global phenomenon, making Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze household names. But while the world saw sparks fly on camera, behind the scenes, there were plenty of tensions, especially during the filming of the now iconic Hungry Eyes montage. Nobody knew that Jennifer Grey was hiding something that would only come to light years later. It was a truth that, once revealed, painted a very different picture of what really happened on set, a much darker one. Red Dawn before Baby and Johnny, before their legendary dance into movie history, there was Red Dawn, a film whose behind-the-scene friction set the tone for what was to come. When Jennifer Grey learned Patrick Swayze had been cast alongside her in Dirty Dancing, her heart reportedly sank. Their history wasn't filled with warm camaraderie or playful banter. It stretched back to Red Dawn, and it was far from ideal. Released in 1984, Red Dawn was a Cold War action film about high school students who become guerrilla fighters after the Soviet invasion. The film was intense, dramatic, and physically demanding. Behind the scenes, it was a pressure cooker of egos and clashing energy. Patrick Swayze played Jed Eckert, a tough, take-charge character who reflected his real-life intensity. A trained dancer and former gymnast, Swayze took his work seriously, often staying in character between takes, even when the cameras weren't rolling. His military-like discipline made him appear overbearing to some. Jennifer Grey, who played Toni Mason, was more spontaneous and emotionally open. Her approach to acting was instinctive and free-flowing, clashing with Swayze's aggressive and macho behavior. He loved playing pranks and cracking jokes, but Grey often felt his antics went too far, especially during emotionally charged scenes. She later admitted that, while she found him charming in bursts, working with him was difficult. He had to be in control of every scene, and his mood was unpredictable. After Red Dawn, she hoped they'd never work together again. But fate had other plans. Casting Ice and Fire. When the casting team began searching for leads for Dirty Dancing, they needed chemistry that was fiery, believable, and deeply emotional. Jennifer Grey had already secured the role of Francis Baby Houseman, but finding Johnny Castle was a struggle. Patrick Swayze had the charisma, the physicality, and, crucially, the dance training. But his history with Grey loomed large. When his name came up, she immediately hesitated, telling the team she wasn't sure she could work with him again. However, producers believed Swayze was the only actor who could bring Johnny to life, so they invited him to the screen test. Before the test, Swayze pulled Grey aside. He looked her in the eye and apologized. According to Grey, he said, I love you, and I'm so sorry. I know you don't want me to do the movie." His voice cracked, and tears welled in his eyes. She still had her guard up, but in that moment, she saw something different in him, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. "We could kill it," he told her. "We could kill it if we did this." Against her better judgment, she agreed to the screen test. What happened next changed everything. The moment they stepped into the scene together, something clicked. The tension transformed into intensity. Their energy was raw, electric, and undeniable. Producers were stunned. Grey's sweet awkwardness met Swayze's commanding presence in a dance that felt real. The roles were theirs. But while the chemistry was electric, the friction from Red Dawn hadn't vanished. It had only been buried, waiting to erupt. Before it became magic, it was a battlefield. Production moved to Lake Lure, North Carolina, where difficult filming conditions began pushing the cast and crew to their limits. The weather was hot, humid, and stifling. The budget was tight. And soon, the unresolved tension between Grey and Swayze would boil to the surface once again. The filming of Dirty Dancing was as intense behind the scenes as it was on screen. The production was tight, time was limited, and both the cast and crew often worked long hours in stifling heat with very little room for error. Sets were bare bones, costumes were reused, and some filming locations were barely held together. Patrick Swayze even injured his knee during shooting, forcing the schedule to be constantly adjusted around his recovery. Jennifer Grey, meanwhile, was still uneasy about Swayze's unpredictability, navigating not only the pressures of the lead role but also the emotional weight of their complicated history. And yet, Amid all the discomfort, a story about love, class, and rebellion began to emerge. But the real drama wasn't just on screen. It was building behind the scenes, and what happened off camera during Dirty Dancing would prove just as unforgettable as what audiences saw in theaters. Once filming officially began, the unity and emotional apology that had brought Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze back together started to fade. The chemistry of their screen test was real, but it couldn't erase years of clashing personalities. On set, the contrast between Grey's intuitive, emotionally driven approach and Swayze's disciplined, perfectionist style quickly resurfaced. As cameras rolled, so did the tension. Swayze, a classically trained ballet dancer with years of professional experience, approached each scene with precision and control. Grey, in contrast, had no formal dance training. She was expressive, instinctive, and often struggled with choreography and rhythm, something that frustrated both her and Swayze. Scenes were sometimes reshot dozens of times because Grey would break into nervous laughter or lose track of choreography. Swayze, a serious and focused performer, had little patience for these interruptions. With a tight filming schedule looming, pressure ran high. Crew members recalled moments when the two leads would barely speak, glaring at each other moments before stepping into character. Yet, once the director called action, the emotional charge between them transformed into the romantic tension audiences came to love. But their friction wasn't just creative, it was deeply personal. Grey sometimes felt Swayze cross a line from passionate to overbearing. In rehearsals, he would correct a form or try to steer a performance, which left her feeling undermined and belittled. She worked from instinct, he worked from precision. It was more than just a difference in methods, it was a clash of egos. At times, crew members had to physically separate them between takes. Though Swayze was widely respected for his talent and drive, some felt he was too controlling in his interactions with Grey. Privately, she expressed her frustration, saying she often felt overshadowed by his dominant presence. She didn't want to be a puppet dancing to his lead. She wanted to be a partner. Ironically, it was that very tension that gave the film its raw emotional power. When Baby looked nervous or tense around Johnny, it wasn't just acting. Much of what played out on screen was charged with real, unscripted emotional energy. And there was one scene where all of that friction, mistrust, and anxiety exploded into something unforgettable: the lift scene. The lift scene in Dirty Dancing has become one of the most iconic moments in cinematic history. It's been parodied, recreated, and admired for decades. But few realize just how much fear and emotional tension surrounded that moment behind the scenes. The scene required Jennifer Grey to sprint into Patrick Swayze's arms as he lifted her high overhead, a move that demanded perfect timing, strength, and, most of all, trust. But trust was in short supply. Grey had never performed the lift before, and, surprisingly, she refused to rehearse it. Terrified of being dropped or injured, she avoided practice entirely. Swayze, with his dancer's mindset and belief in preparation, found this frustrating. He believed repetition was key, while Grey relied on adrenaline and instinct. The filming conditions only added to the pressure. While earlier lift scenes had been rehearsed repeatedly in a freezing lake, the final, climactic lift was done indoors. But it was even more nerve-wracking. It had to be perfect. Tension had been building for weeks. In one particularly well-known scene, where Johnny runs his hand down Baby's arm and she breaks into laughter, Grey's giggling wasn't scripted. Take after take, she couldn't stop herself. Swayze became visibly angry, unable to understand her loss of composure. Director Emil Ardolino, however, embraced the chaos. He encouraged improvisation and often kept the cameras rolling even during unscripted moments. One such scene, the pose immortalized in the movie poster, had Grey standing in front of Swayze with her back to him, lifting her arm as he traced his fingers down it. Even that moment, so graceful on screen, was born from real friction and vulnerability. In the end, the tension between Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze wasn't just a behind-the-scenes struggle, it became the very heartbeat of Dirty Dancing. Their real-life challenges, miscommunications, and emotional push and pull brought an authenticity to Baby and Johnny's love story that audiences could feel. And that's part of what made the film unforgettable. What was meant to be a serious and tender moment became something else entirely. Jennifer Grey, exhausted and ticklish, couldn't stop giggling every time Patrick Swayze tried to perform the move. No matter how many takes director Emil Ardolino asked for, the laughter continued. Swayze grew increasingly irritated, finding Gray's behavior distracting and unprofessional. However, the producers saw something special in those unscripted moments. They decided to leave the scene in the film, complete with Gray's infectious giggle and Swayze's annoyed expression, because it captured something real, raw, and electric. Despite the chaos, when it came time to shoot the film's most iconic scene, the final lift, it was done in a single take with no rehearsal. Fueled by pure tension and adrenaline, it worked. The moment became the emotional climax of Dirty Dancing and has been adored by audiences ever since. But the emotional friction between the two stars had been simmering for a long time and was about to reach a breaking point. Earlier, during the filming of the sensual dance montage set to Hungry Eyes, tensions behind the scenes boiled over. What happened during that shoot was something Jennifer Grey kept secret for years, something she didn't publicly speak about until much later. And when she finally did, her revelation was explosive. The Hungry Eyes montage is remembered as a playful, romantic moment in the film. It captures Baby and Johnny's growing chemistry through teasing touches, shy glances, and synchronized movements. But the reality behind the scenes was far less charming. By this point in the shoot, both Grey and Swayze were emotionally frayed. Grey, already fragile from the demands of the shoot and her uneasy dynamic with her co-star, found it increasingly difficult to perform the intimate choreography. Meanwhile, Swayze's frustration with her giggles, delays, and miscues continued to build. According to crew members, he began snapping between takes, muttering under his breath, rolling his eyes, and even storming off set at one point. Grey kept her feelings bottled up. She sensed the disdain in Swayze's gaze, especially in scenes that required physical closeness. What audiences saw as smoldering intensity, she experienced as coldness and condescension. But she chose not to speak out. With a tight schedule, a modest budget, and the fear of being labeled difficult, she stayed silent. It wasn't until decades later, in a raw and honest interview, that she finally opened up about the emotional strain. "And it's bad," she said bluntly. She described feeling alienated and belittled, claiming that the looks Swayze gave her during those scenes were filled with resentment, not affection. Beneath the smiles and flirtation, she was struggling. The emotional weight she carried was invisible to fans, but it was there, and it shaped every frame of that montage. Ironically, the very tension that caused the pain became the emotional charge audiences connected with. That scene felt real because it was. The intensity wasn't just acting, it was frustration, restraint, and buried resentment playing out on screen. The producers noticed things were getting out of control. Concerned that the animosity between the leads might derail the upcoming love scenes, writer Eleanor Bergstein and director Emil Ardolino took action. They made Grey and Swayze sit down and re-watch their original screen tests, the same ones that had won them the roles. The breathtaking chemistry in those auditions reminded both actors of what they were capable of. It worked. With renewed energy and a deeper understanding of their dynamic, they returned to the set to finish the film. After wrapping the climactic dance finale, which included the unforgettable lift, Dirty Dancing moved into post-production. No one involved had any idea what was about to happen next. Released in August 1987, Dirty Dancing was a low-budget film with no major stars and a simple story set in the early 1960s. Expectations were modest at best, but something about the film struck a deep chord with audiences. Word of mouth spread quickly. Within weeks, it became a box office sensation, eventually grossing over $214 million worldwide. What began as a quiet release exploded into a full-blown cultural phenomenon. Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze became global icons. Fans fell in love with the story of Baby and Johnny, two mismatched souls from different worlds united by dance. The soundtrack went multi-platinum, with hits like I've Had the Time of My Life dominating radio charts. The film earned an Academy Award for Best Original Song and a Golden Globe, solidifying its legacy as one of the most beloved romances in movie history. But while the public celebrated the on-screen chemistry between Grey and Swayze, few knew the emotional truth that lay beneath it. A story not of love, but of creative conflict, emotional endurance, and the power of performance under pressure. The emotional performances that made Dirty Dancing unforgettable were rooted in experiences that remained hidden for years. Jennifer Grey later admitted that she had to process many complex feelings after the film's release. The personal discomfort, silent tensions, and private hurt she endured while making the movie left a lasting impact. Yet over time, she came to understand that those very challenges gave the film its rawness and authenticity. The tension on screen wasn't just acting, it was real, and that's exactly why audiences connected with it so deeply. Despite their difficult dynamic, both Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze acknowledged the magic they created together. Over the years, the bitterness between them began to soften. In 2004, they reunited for a Dirty Dancing-themed documentary and were able to reflect on their shared history with newfound perspective. Grey spoke respectfully about Swayze's dedication and talent, while Swayze, before his passing in 2009, openly praised Grey's emotional vulnerability and growth as an actress. He even admitted that he might have been too hard on her during filming, hinting at a quiet understanding of the tension they never fully resolved. The film's enormous success shaped both of their careers in lasting ways. For Jennifer Grey, the role of Baby became a defining moment, although it also made it difficult to break free from the image of the innocent girl at the center of Dirty Dancing. Patrick Swayze, on the other hand, became a leading man in Hollywood, starring in blockbusters like Ghost and Point Break. Yet no matter where their careers took them, they were always remembered first and foremost as Baby and Johnny. Looking back, Dirty Dancing became more than just a film. It was a moment in time, a story that captured the hearts of millions while quietly hiding the emotional toll it took to create it. Long before the fame and glowing reviews, this was a production riddled with tension, giggles, miscues, and frustrating rehearsals. One moment more than any other symbolized that blend of struggle and beauty, a failed screen test captured on a single reel that nearly ended it all before it began. Years later, director Emile Ardolino would credit his decision to give the pair a second chance with saving the film. That second screen test convinced everyone that Grey and Swayze truly were Baby and Johnny. Dirty Dancing not only turned Ardolino into a Hollywood legend, but also created a legacy that's still alive nearly 40 years later. Jennifer Grey's reflection on the film had become one of grace and honesty. Despite the pain she experienced, she ultimately recognized the value of what they created together. In Patrick Swayze's final years, after he was diagnosed with cancer, Grey reached out to him privately. She later shared how meaningful that reconciliation was. Patrick was a rare and beautiful person, she said. Complicated, but kind. Her words mark a transformation in their relationship, from one of creative tension to one of mutual respect and emotional clarity. Though she had once described him as disgusting in earlier interviews, as time passed, Jennifer Grey began to speak about Swayze with deep admiration. She came to understand that their volatile connection helped shape the intense, believable performances that made Dirty Dancing a cultural touchstone. The film's story of forbidden love and dance transcended its modest beginnings to become one of the most iconic and beloved movies of all time. The hidden tensions behind the scenes are now part of the movie's history, but they ultimately enriched its emotional energy. Jennifer Grey's decision to keep the personal pain quiet during production allowed the film's raw emotion to shine. The legacy of Dirty Dancing proves that real emotion, whether it's pain, joy, or passion, can be transformed into art that leaves a permanent mark on the hearts of viewers. What do you think about Dirty Dancing? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.